Louisville expert. Kevin has been a professional writer for more than 3 decades. His writing has received awards from Associated Press, the Society of Professional Journalists, the Indiana State Press Association, and more. His work has been published in many publications that you know, including Leo Weekly, Bourbon Plus Magazine, Thrillist, Alcohol Professor, Louisville Magazine, among others. Today he is presenting his new book, Oldest Louisville. Whether you've lived here all your life or you're new to the area, there's always more to learn about Louisville. With Kevin as your guide, this book takes you into the beginnings of what makes Louisville unique, what makes it special. From the early days of the Derby to the bourbon that put Kentucky on the map. You'll find gems that you might not have noticed before, such as cemeteries, parks, and even the oldest bowling alley. We're so excited to have Kevin here today. Please join me in welcoming him.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to live up to that. But thanks everyone for being here on a Saturday afternoon, and as always, thanks to Carmichaels for having me around. They always are treating me well, and I hope I treat them well in return. So I came up with a system. The last time I spoke, I set my timer on my phone for 20 minutes so that I would get an alarm tell me to shut up. And what I've decided, it worked out perfectly, because literally when I said anybody had questions, my alarm went off. So I'm like, now I'm just going to read your eyes. When you start to glaze over, then I'll stop talking. How's that sound? So we're going to shoot for about 20 minutes here, and then you can ask me whatever questions you want. So when I write these books about Louisville history, you know, I've been living here basically my entire life. And so if you remember when you were in middle school, high school, your history book didn't really, at least to me, didn't tell a lot of human stories. There was a lot of dates, and it was always, this is going to be on the quiz, so memorize this. I didn't really get much out of it, so I didn't like it that much. And as I got older, you know, and I became an antique myself, it became more of a thing of, I wonder what that is. I wonder what that used to be. I wonder what this, you know, if this has been around for 150 years, who was there before me? What did that mean to someone else who lived here long before I was born? And so what I try to do is interweave human stories with historical stories so that you won't doze off while you're reading. And there will not be a quiz. That's the best part of it all. I'm not going to quiz you on this stuff. You just get to read it at your leisure and then do what you want with it. But another thing that I'll try to set out to do with these books is I find that in our workaday lives, we find ourselves in our cars, driving to work, driving the kids to school, driving to the store, driving to this appointment or that appointment, and we drive past everything going 40 miles an hour. We don't notice it. It's just a blur. It's an ongoing blur. Some of the things in this book are just blurs to us. I spend a lot of time walking my dog around this neighborhood, so I get to see it at a slower pace, although it's not that much slower with my dog. But the story I tell for two books ago, I wrote one called Secret Louisville, and I had lived here at that time about a dozen years. And there was something I kept hearing about called the chicken steps. If you live in this neighborhood, you know what the chicken steps are. I didn't have any idea what they were or where they were. And so I decided, I figured out, you know, on Google Maps about where they were, and I parked my car at the old CVS parking lot. So I'm going to find these chicken steps once and for all. I got in my car and I stepped onto the sidewalk and there was a green sign that said chicken steps that way. I've been driving by it for a dozen years and never seen it, you know. I'm like, so that really inspired me to kind of write these books in a certain way. And so I'm just going to touch on, you know, 2 or 3 of these here today that I find have some interesting human stories that you may not know about. I'm going to start with one that I didn't really know about until I started looking into it and researching it. And this is on page 50. But it's the life-saving station number 10. So this person is nodding. But most people that I've talked to, you know, I was interviewed by WHAS and I mentioned this and she said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I said, just go to the Bell of Louisville and meet me there and I'll tell you about it. And so life-saving station number 10 was established in 1928. And it was back in a time when people were moving, well, it was actually established earlier than that. The current one It was built in 1928. Back in the 1800s, late 1800s, people migrating west might not have known that there was a Falls of the Ohio, and that could lead to problems. Because a small boat didn't know where they were navigating toward, could just go right over the falls, and people would die, and boats would be destroyed. And so, Life Saving Station number 10 was there to make sure that didn't happen. They were there to clear debris, make sure that boats got through the locks safely, make sure nobody died. And so there were 3 guys in particular, and their names were William Devon Jr., John Tully, and John Galooly. And they collectively became known as the heroes of the falls because they saved literally hundreds of lives and hundreds of boats over the decades that they worked on that life-saving station. And they were local heroes. And it was a thing where they were given congressional recognition and statewide, federal, and it was the only inland life-saving station in America. All the others were on coasts. But we had this river with this falls and this busy hotbed of activity and so it was needed, and they did their jobs amazingly. One of my favorite stories is that one of them, and I'll have to look here real quickly to see if I can find which one it was, but actually he went out on his day off on a pleasure excursion with his wife, and she fell in, and he had to rescue her on his off day. So that would be an interesting anecdote. But there was in 1891, there was a steamer coming down the river called Hibernia that went over the falls, and they were able to rescue everyone aboard, essentially. So it's really interesting stories of what I like to call dare and do, because I used to watch Batman as a kid. So let's find another one of my favorites. Yes. Out in the west part of town, of course, Portland really kind of predates Louisville. It was the original port, thus the name, Portland. But one of the first chapters I wrote was about the oldest wood frame structure. And this was the Squire Eric House, which is in a nondescript neighborhood in Portland. And it was built in 1815, passed to different people, but then when Portland got his first magistrate, Squire Eric, he moved into the house, and he was known as being quite a character about town. So there was no jail at the time in Portland or in Louisville. And so he put bars on the windows and bars on his basement door, and he kept prisoners in his basement. And he would sometimes have court in his dining room, literally in his house, because they had no facilities. But this guy was like a storyteller and just a wild, interesting dude. His full name was Squire Jacob Wistock Eric. So he was actually at one point during the Civil War captured because they thought he was Robert E. Lee. They didn't. He looked so much like him that the North thought they had got this big prize, and then they found out, oh, this is just some local magistrate that we captured in Louisville, Kentucky. So, yeah, you win some, you lose some, I guess. I guess the North won that one, though, didn't they? So, they won the war. Liberty lost that battle, but won the war. Checking my time. I got enough for 2 more, I think. As long as I don't talk too long. See, I can sit up here and prattle on all day about this stuff. Steve knows what I'm talking about. He's a historian. And it's when you start down that nerd rabbit hole, sometimes there's no coming out of it. So I'm going to try to spare you that if I possibly can. And I apologize if I don't. Let's see. So this is one of my favorites too. And the current there's a city building that has the Jefferson County Law Library. That was the old jail. That was the jailhouse for many, many years. And of course, it was on Green Street. Now it's called Liberty Street, which I always thought was ironic that there was a jail on Liberty. But if you go in there, it's all offices and auditoriums, and they have a lot of public meetings there. There are a lot of different county and city offices. But if you go into the law library, literally the last time I spoke there, and every time I have a book come out, I can go there and do their luncheon and hang out with them, and they feed me chili. But they said, come through here, we want to show you something. And they opened these doors, and we went through like a little storage room, and we walked, and there's 2 jail cells, 2 big holding cells, and they were like, and I'm like, what in the world? They never did upgrade this part of the facility. They said, come on through here. We went in, there's this gymnasium that looks like it was a set from the Shawshank Redemption. This old, early 1900s gymnasium that's just been sitting there gathering dust, and there's all this boxes of paperwork and other garbage that they'll never use. And so I had to put that in the book, and I just said oldest jail cells. I don't know if they're the oldest. I apologize if the superlative doesn't always hold true. But another one that's not really the oldest, but I figured it out this way. In the UPS, out of the airport, in the UPS part of the airport, there is an old Indian burial mound. And that was another thing I was not aware of. And let me find this. It's going to be in page 25, if we're keeping score at home. So I interviewed someone who was there when this was discovered, Ann Bader, who's a historian and archaeologist, and she said it's not at all the oldest. But I said, okay, well, is it the oldest one that's located in the international airport? She said, well, that's probably true, yes. So I get away with that one. But it's interesting because, there was when in the early 70s when this was discovered and they started to unearth it, they started to excavate it. When Native American groups found out about it, they didn't like it. They said, this is basically grave digging. They said that. This is, we don't go and dig up your Western European cemeteries. Why are you digging up ours? And they had a point. And so they came to town and they protested, and they didn't get anywhere because the laws were different then. But Ann told me, she said, people talk about that burial ground as if it's just an urban legend. People still doubt that it's really there because it really is just a patch of grass with a fence around it in the middle of an airport, But she said, people say it's just a story, but she said, I was there. It's not just a story. She was there excavating, and she said some of the bones and things were put back, but some were actually kept. And I think they're now at UK. It was the U of L team that did it, but now I think they're being stored at UK. Is this true? That's what she said. She thought they were. So, okay, one more, and this is maybe my favorite in the book, so I put it very last. The oldest Catholic cemetery, St. Louis Cemetery, which is there between Baxter and Barrett. So there are a few semi-famous people. There's an ex-Major League ball player buried there. There's a John F. Ertle's Brewing, if you remember Ertle's Brewing, he's buried there. A couple of politicians are buried there. No one, a lot of the graves go back to Irish settlers and German settlers, and so there's a lot of history there. But one thing that I found when I was writing this book and actually getting ready to finish it up was in 1890 there was a pistol duel in that cemetery. And I thought, this has to be made up. But the more I searched, the more like the New York Times covered it, the Washington Post covered it. It was national news, this duel in Louisville. And so it's a crazy story. So again, I'll try to keep it as short as I can. So a young woman from Evansville came to Louisville to visit some friends and to hang out for a few days. And her fiance back in Evansville didn't hear from her for a few days and started worrying that things were not all right. So he made his way, no doubt by horse and wagon, to Louisville. And the friends were like, well, we don't know where she is. So he went out looking for her, and he came across his fiance walking hand in hand with this other guy. So naturally he was a little concerned about this development that she had not told him about. Words were exchanged, and one of them said, let's have a duel. Whoever wins gets the girl. And I'm like, I'm reading this, I'm like, this really happened? We walked that cemetery with my dog all the time and her son. So the last time we were there, so they said that they were going to do it in Cave Hill, and they decided to keep going down Baxter. And they went into the entrance off Baxter. Well, there's no entrance to that cemetery off Baxter. So the last time she and I went, that's my fiance, by the way, I was looking at that wall, I'm like, aha, I can see where the brick's different. They filled that wall in at some point, so there was an entrance, so this all was very true. So anyway, this is some great writing from the Courier-Journal. Yes, they called a reporter. There was a reporter there for the duel. They got a doctor. They got a physician to tend to whoever got shot. And he's the one that said 1, 2, 3, fire. Literally the doctor. Louisville was the Wild West, man. It was the Wild West. So, here we go. From the Courier-Journal, 1890. As the last number was called by the physician, a blaze of fire flashed from the muzzles of both pistols. Before one could see whether either man was wounded, 4 more reports rang out. And Mr. Sanders staggered up to the tombstone nearest him and supported himself with his cold sides. So the fiancé, Robert Sanders, was shot twice, once in the chest, I think once in the arm. Did not die. But the other guy fled Louisville to avoid being prosecuted. And Mr. Sanders also went back to Evansville, and nobody got the girl, apparently. But the Courier-Journal wrote in an editorial the next day. I love this. They called the duel, the fickleness of a woman is the one thing least worth fighting about in this world. A little misogynistic, but I get the point. Okay, with that, I'll take any questions that you might have. Anybody? Well, that's easy.
Well, on the
I knew you'd have one.
on the Indian Mound, you can actually see it from Google Earth.
Yeah.
If you go on Google
That's
Earth.
the picture I put in here because
Okay.
there's no way I'm going to get there. The
UPS is not gonna
Worldport,
let
yeah,
you
they're not going
in.
to let me in there. So yeah.
And there's a burial mound out in Sutherland neighborhood as well, all US 42. In fact, they got a fence around it and sign that says kids don't play on it and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Otherwise, you'll be cursed, and be like the Wamapoke will curse you.
Did you know there's a burial ground out in the fairgrounds?
I've heard that before.
I seen it, yeah, I didn't know it was there, and,
you're talking about the Oldham Cemetery?
yes.
Yeah. Oldham
And they've
Cemetery.
got a fence around it, it's right over close to,
Kentucky Kingdom. It's right in front of Kentucky Kingdom.
There's so many. The zoo has a cemetery, and
Yeah.
there's the one in the parking lot there over in what's the neighborhood?
Bed Bath and Beyond.
Yeah, Bed Bath and yeah.
Breckenridge,
It's like hedgerows around it, and I never knew it was there.
well, I never knew that one was there until this past year.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't either.
And so after our concert during the fair and all come through, and we sat down, and there it was.
Yeah.
They have.
Well, luckily you slowed down enough to see it, actually notice it.
Yes. Most of your writing focuses on Louisville. Can you talk a little about that inspiration and fascination with your hometown?
Oh, they say that Louisville is the place you can leave, but you always come back. I actually moved away and had no intention of coming back 30 plus years ago. And fate brought me back kind of against my will. And I ended up saying, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to stay now because I wound up having a son, and I need to stick around. And it just, the longer I lived here, the more I appreciated the history, the people, the culture. Because when you travel other places, you travel to New York and Boston, and you travel, other larger cities. I'll never forget what a friend of mine told me when I was in Boston. And my friend who's right here, we were going to go out, and she said, "Watch out for those mass holes." And she was right. The people in Boston, they're not friendly drivers at all. You can make that case for Louisville, but most of the people that I meet in Louisville are very friendly. And then people, sometimes to make ends meet, I bartend at a place down in Nulu. And people come in from out of town, they always say, Louisville is so friendly, we always love to come back because everyone here is so friendly. And I'm like, hey, I guess that's true. So I think I married that sort of affection for the culture. This idea that we have arts, we have sports, we have this history, we have this great museum, row, we've got all these parks, these great parks, and we've also got a little bit of more of a small town feel. Because, as you know, in Louisville, when someone says, "Where'd you go to school?" you don't say Ohio State. you say Atherton or Trinity or St. X. You know, unfortunately, I say Clarksville, and people look at me like I'm a leper. Yeah, I grew up in southern Indiana for the first few years of my life. But no, it's just one of those things that it kind of grew on me, you know, kind of like a fungus. Yes, ma'am.
I just moved here like 3 weeks ago.
Okay,
so
wow,
this
welcome.
is all brand new.
Hopefully what I'm saying is ringing true.
No, but I moved from Florida. My son's here, but it was
Okay.
just time to get out of Florida. And,
Yeah, I can see that.
One of the things that has fascinated me is the library here, which is a gorgeous building. A friend had asked me, is it a I had posted a picture and I said, it's so beautiful. And my friend said, is it a Carnegie library? So I researched it and found out it is,
Yeah.
but can you explain it further, what a Carnegie library is?
Well, it's funny that I wrote a piece about that library, and it got cut from the book. So several chapters didn't make it out of the editing room, unfortunately. But you know, Andrew Carnegie funded tons and tons of libraries all over America back in the late 1800s, and there are a lot of them in Louisville. How many, Steve? Do you know how many there are?
Gosh, we got some in southern Indiana.
Yeah,
3 in
Albany
southern
has
Indiana,
one.
yeah, and 6 or 7 here in Louisville.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean and I don't know enough about it to go into great detail, but if you look up Andrew Carnegie, you're going to find all that you need because he funded a lot
So
of
it's when
libraries.
wealthy people used to actually build things.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you know, they're building spaceships. Come on. But no, one of the first African American library in the country was here in Louisville. It's still the building. It's a Carnegie, right? Yeah, it's a
That's
Carnegie
correct, yeah,
over out in the West End. It's worth checking out.
Okay.
If you walk about a block or two that way, you'll find one, the Crescent Hill Library.
Yeah, I think
That's a
that's what she was
Carnegie?
talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
It's
the one I was
beautiful.
talking about,
Yeah,
because
it's
I pass it
beautiful.
all the time, so.
Well, maybe you should write another book then, and get those chapters that were cut.
Yeah, what is your
Well-
next book?
The sequel.
Well, that gives me a segue into saying if you join my Patreon community, it's $5 a month. I'm going to publish all those on there, so you'll get those bonus chapters if you join my Patreon community. So just go to my website, KevinGibsonWriter.com, and you can sign up there.
Cool. Because I mean, those sound like interesting chapters, because the libraries are gorgeous here. I mean, they're beautiful.
Hey, and you have access to them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, you want to sign some books?
I'll happy to sign some books. I guess you got to buy them up there and bring them back here. I guess that's how it's going to work.
Okay,
Now I'm going to drink some water.
thank you, Kevin.
Thanks so much.